Darius Washington was 41 years old, and until that Tuesday evening, he believed he was building something that mattered. 15 years of pre-dawn job sites, calloused hands, and a construction company he'd grown from a single truck and a tool belt into a $1.2 million insured operation. He thought his wife Ariana was his partner in all of it. He came home early that afternoon to surprise her. 10th anniversary flowers in his hand, catering confirmation on his mind. The house was empty. Her laptop was open on the kitchen counter. He wasn't looking for the truth, but the truth was right there in an open email thread. 8 words that stopped his blood cold. Half now, half after. Thursday. Don't miss. His wife had hired someone to kill him. Thursday. 4 days away. And while Darius stood in that kitchen holding flowers, Ariana was somewhere in that city, completely certain she had married a quiet, overlooked man who would never see it coming. She had no idea how wrong she was, and when she laughed at his grave, she sealed her own fate. What Darius did next would cost her everything. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The school smelled like dust and old wood, and something new trying to replace it. Darius Washington walked the east corridor of the Millbrook Elementary renovation with a clipboard in one hand and a cold cup of coffee in the other. Morning light came through the gaps where the old windows had been pulled out, cutting across the concrete floor in long yellow lines. Around him, his crew moved the way a good crew moves, without chaos, without wasted steps. Marcus was running the electrical conduit along the north wall. Deshaun and 2 other guys were pulling up the last of the original flooring in the far classroom, the pry bars rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Somebody's radio played low from somewhere deeper in the building. Darius stopped at a section of newly poured concrete and crouched down. He pressed 2 fingers against the surface. Still curing. He checked the timestamp on his clipboard. Right on schedule. He stood and kept walking. This contract, a full interior renovation of a 40-year-old elementary school, was the biggest his company had ever landed. 14 months of work. 8 figures on paper. It had taken him 15 years to get here. 15 years of early mornings, busted knuckles, missed weekends, and handshake deals that grew into real contracts. He'd started with 1 used truck, a set of tools he'd bought half on credit, and a reputation for showing up when other guys didn't. He still drove the same kind of truck. He stepped outside to the west entrance and pulled out his phone. Ariana picked up on the 4th ring. Then it went to voicemail. He waited. Called again. Voicemail again. He looked at the screen for a moment, then typed a quick message. Checking. You confirmed the catering. Call me when you get this. It wasn't unusual for her to miss a call. She worked part-time consulting and kept irregular hours. But she had promised, specifically, with eye contact over breakfast 3 days ago, that she would call the catering company that morning and print the confirmation so they both had a copy. Their 10th anniversary dinner was Friday. He had made the reservation himself, then handed it off to her to handle the details. He didn't ask her for much. She knew that. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and spent another 2 hours on site, walking the rooms, checking the pace of the work, talking to Marcus about a supply delay, and to Deshaun about the floor adhesive specs. At noon, he told his site manager Jerome that he was stepping out early and to call him if anything needed a decision. He stopped at a flower stand on the way home. The woman behind the counter asked him what the occasion was, and he said, 10 years, and she smiled like that meant something good. He chose sunflowers, Ariana's favorite, the ones she'd carried at their wedding, and he paid without checking the price. The house was quiet when he pulled up. Ariana's car was gone. That was fine. He'd drop the flowers off, find the printed confirmation on the counter, and head back to the site. Simple. The front door unlocked. He set his keys in the bowl by the door, same as always. The kitchen was clean. The coffee maker was still warm. 2 mugs in the drying rack, which meant she'd had coffee with someone that morning, probably her friend Dana. He set the sunflowers on the counter. Her laptop was open at the kitchen table. That was normal. She often left it running. He glanced at it without meaning to, just a look while he scanned the counter for the printed confirmation she'd promised. He didn't see the printout. He looked at the counter again. Slower. Nothing. He checked the little basket by the refrigerator where she left papers, grocery lists, takeout menus, nothing about catering. He turned back to the table. The laptop screen had not gone dark. The browser was open. He leaned forward to check the email. She sometimes forwarded confirmations to herself, and his eyes landed on the subject line of an open thread. Timeline. Confirm before Friday. He read the first line once. Then he read it again. The husband leaves the site alone on Thursdays around 6. Parking lot is unlit on the north side. He drives the black F-250 with the company logo. I need the balance transferred before I move. His jaw tightened. His body went still. The kind of still that a man goes when his brain is working faster than his body can keep up with. He scrolled up. 9 emails. He read all of them, slowly, the way he read every contract he'd ever signed. Then he found Ariana's reply, sent at 8:47 that morning. Half now, half after. Thursday. Don't miss. He did not react. He took out his phone. He photographed every email in the thread, all 9 in order, and made sure each image was clear. He checked them twice. Then he set the phone down gently, closed nothing, moved nothing, and walked out of the house with the same quiet steps he'd come in with. The sunflowers stayed on the counter. He sat in his truck in the driveway for a long time. The flowers he'd bought. The mug for 2 in the drying rack. The anniversary dinner he'd made a reservation for. He sat with all of it. Then he picked up his phone and dialed Uncle Reggie. The sun was going down behind the tree line when Darius finally pulled out of his driveway and drove back to the job site. He didn't go inside. He parked in the lot, cut the engine, and sat in the dark cab of his truck with the phone pressed to his ear. Reggie picked up on the second ring. Hey, nephew. Everything okay? No, Darius said. It's not. He spoke for 6 minutes without stopping. Flat voice. No trembling. He told Reggie about the missed calls, the empty house, the open laptop. He described the email thread word for word, from memory, because he had read it enough times to carry it. He told Reggie what Ariana wrote. Half now, half after. Thursday. Don't miss. When he finished, the line was quiet for a moment. You need to call the police, Reggie said. Tonight. No. Darius, think about what you just heard. Darius's voice didn't rise. I walk into a station tonight and tell them my wife hired somebody to kill me, based on emails I photographed on her laptop. No warrant, no chain of custody. By morning, she has a lawyer telling a judge those screenshots are inadmissible. The hitman gets a text to abort, and he's gone. And she sits across from me at that anniversary dinner on Friday, and I got nothing. Silence. Reggie exhaled slowly. The sound of a man who had spent 30 years watching exactly that happen. You're right, he said. His voice had changed, flattened into something more professional, more careful. You're right. We can't move yet. I know I'm right. Darius was already scrolling through his phone with his thumb, moving through the screenshots he had taken in the kitchen. He had captured more than the email thread. He had scrolled through the inbox, through the folders. One of them had stopped him on his way out the door, but he had kept walking, kept moving, kept his face neutral for a neighborhood that wasn't even watching. He tapped on that folder now. It was labeled Finances. Hold on, he said. What? He opened the first document. A PDF. He recognized the letterhead immediately. It was the life insurance company he had used for 11 years. But he had never opened this policy document on any screen in that house. He read the beneficiary line. Ariana D. Washington, sole beneficiary. Death benefit, $200,000. He kept scrolling. The next document was a loan agreement. His name was on it. His business, his address, his tax identification number. A $340,000 draw against his company's line of credit. He scrolled to the signature line. His name was there. His signature. Except he had never signed it. He knew his own signature the way he knew his own handwriting, the way he knew the sound of a wall that was load-bearing versus one that wasn't. He had never signed that document. He kept his voice steady. She took out a $340 against the business. In my name, I didn't sign it. Reggie said nothing. Darius could hear him breathing. There's one more. He opened the last file. A real estate purchase agreement. He read it once, and then he read it again. A property in Scottsdale, Arizona. Purchase price listed. Closing date listed. 2 names on the deed. Ariana Washington. Paul Whitfield. Darius stared at the name. Paul Whitfield, he said out loud. The name meant nothing to him. He had no face for it, no memory attached to it. He had never heard it spoken in his house. Reggie went quiet. Not the quiet of thinking. The quiet of a man absorbing something. You know that name? Darius asked. No, but I know what it means. Reggie's voice was careful and even. Darius, she's been building a life on top of your grave. You understand what I'm saying to you? This didn't start last week. That property, that loan, the insurance, somebody organized all of this. This goes back at least 2 years. Darius looked out through the windshield at the dark job site. At the school he was rebuilding. If you go to police tonight, Reggie continued, she lawyers up by morning. The hitman walks. The fraud charges might not stick without a body and a completed conspiracy. But if she believes the plan worked, he stopped, started again. If she thinks you're dead, she moves, she celebrates, she makes mistakes, and we catch every single one of them. You're telling me I have to die. I'm telling you that you have to die, Reggie said. Just not for real. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The truck cab was very dark and very quiet. Kwame, Darius finally said, first thing tomorrow. He needs to know. He'll hold it. I know he will. You chose right with that one. Darius set the phone down on the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove home. He pulled into the driveway. He walked through the front door. He set his keys in the bowl. The sunflowers were still on the counter. Ariana was in the kitchen, her back to him, humming something quiet, while she moved a pan on the stove. Hey, baby, she said without turning around. Dinner's almost ready. Smells good, he said, and he sat down at the table and waited. Wednesday morning came in gray and cold. Darius was on the job site by 6:30. He walked the east corridor of the school the same way he always did, measuring, checking, calling out corrections to his crew in the same quiet voice he always used. His foreman, Marcus, handed him a clipboard. He reviewed it. He handed it back. He drank his coffee standing next to a window frame that needed resquaring and thought about load-bearing walls. He did not think about Thursday. He would not let himself think about Thursday until it was over. While he worked, Reggie moved. Darius knew this because Reggie sent him 2 texts across the day. Short, factual, the kind a retired Chicago detective sends when he wants a record of nothing. 8:47 a.m. First call made. We're good on the coroner end. 1:14 p.m. Second piece confirmed. Thursday is a go. That was all. Darius read them both once and put his phone back in his pocket. Reggie's network was not something he had ever asked about before. It had never been relevant before. But 30 years with Chicago PD left a man with a certain kind of debt owed to him from a certain kind of people. A coroner's office contact who had seen Reggie cover for him once on a chain of custody problem, an off-the-books investigator named Sid, who had been working on Reggie's informal payroll for a decade, and who owed him something larger and older that neither of them ever named out loud. By Wednesday evening, the plan was built. Thursday, North Parking Lot, 6 p.m. Darius's black F-250 with the company logo on the door. A mannequin dressed in his canvas work jacket, his steel-toed boots, his worn canvas pants from the hook by the back door, his wallet in the right rear pocket, his personal cell phone in the left front. A controlled collision. Sid's truck, the right angle, the right speed, staged to read as a hit and run. A body that would take any first responder at least 72 hours to doubt, and a coroner's contact who would manage the process long enough for the window to hold. Kwame had retrieved the clothes from Darius's truck that afternoon, slipping them from the cab in the construction yard while no one was watching. He hadn't said a word to Darius about it. He had just sent a single text. Done. Wednesday night, Darius came home to pot roast. Ariana had cooked it low and slow all afternoon. He could smell it before he even opened the front door. His mother's recipe, the one Ariana had asked for in their second year of marriage, and had only made 5 or 6 times since. The table was set. There were candles. She smiled when he walked in. She took his jacket. She asked about the job site and listened while he answered, her chin resting on her hand, her eyes patient and warm. He watched her move through the kitchen. He watched the way she tucked her hair back when she bent to check the oven. He watched her hands when she set the plates down. Those were the same hands that had typed half now, half after. Thursday. Don't miss. He did not look away. He did not let anything show. She reached across the table and touched his hand. Her fingers were warm. Her expression was soft. 10 years, she said. Can you believe it? No, he said. I really can't. He held her gaze, and he did not break. Thursday evening, Sid's truck hit the F-250 at 6:04 p.m. Darius was in Reggie's spare room by then, sitting on the edge of a narrow bed with a laptop open on the dresser. Reggie had a contact with access to the parking lot's exterior camera feed, the same camera that sat dark on the north side, the same darkness Ariana had described in her email to the Hitman. He watched the collision on the screen. He watched the responders arrive. He watched the scene get roped off. At 8:14 p.m., Kwame called Ariana. Darius had the phone on speaker, the audio recording already running. He heard Kwame's voice, cracked and small, in a way that didn't sound like performance, but probably was, because Kwame was that kind of man. Ariana, there's been an accident. It's Darius. They're saying he didn't make it. On the video feed, he watched her. She covered her mouth with both hands. Her shoulders pulled inward and shook. She pressed her back against the kitchen counter and slid down 2 inches, the way a person does when their legs stop cooperating. She was the picture of a widow. Then Kwame's voice went quiet on the phone, giving her space. And Ariana straightened. She walked to the window. She looked out at the dark backyard. And she smiled. Not a twitch. Not a reflex. A slow, full, deliberate smile. The kind a person wears when something they have been waiting on for a very long time has finally arrived. Darius watched it happen and felt something go cold and quiet inside him. Not rage. Something past rage. 4 days later, a gray stone marker went up in a county cemetery plot. Reggie had arranged it through a filing that would take weeks to legally unravel. No casket. Just the marker. The name. The dates. Kwame took Ariana to see it on a Saturday afternoon. She wore a black dress and a veil. She brought flowers. She stood at the foot of the marker with her hands folded in front of her. Kwame stood beside her, his face a careful mask of grief. Then Ariana exhaled. It was a short sound, quiet and private, like something she had been holding in her chest for a very long time and could finally release. A small laugh, not for anyone, just for herself. She leaned slightly forward, almost like she was speaking to the stone, and she whispered one word, "Finally." That evening, Kwame drove to Reggie's house and handed Darius the recorder without a word. Darius sat alone in the back room with the door closed and played the audio through once. He heard the cemetery sounds, the wind, Kwame's shoes on the gravel path, the rustle of Ariana's dress. He heard the exhale, the small, relieved laugh, the word, "Finally." He set the recorder down on the bed beside him. He looked at the wall for a moment. The last thread, the last small, stubborn piece of him that had been hoping for some other explanation, some misread situation, some version of this that wasn't exactly what it was, snapped clean and quiet. Good, he thought. Now we begin. The morning came in quiet. Darius sat at Reggie's kitchen table before the sun was fully up. A burner phone, a laptop, a yellow legal pad with 3 lines already written on it in his small, careful handwriting, a cup of coffee going cold at his elbow. Reggie was still asleep. The house was the kind of silence that feels heavy, the silence of a place where serious things happen and the walls know it. Darius opened the laptop and got to work. Petra Hanks had a reputation. Reggie had given him her name 2 nights ago, said it the same way he said everything important. Once, directly, without decoration. She's the best fraud litigator in the state. Black woman. She's been doing this 20 years, and she doesn't lose. Darius had looked her up that same night. Bar Association records, case history, a profile in a regional legal journal from 4 years back. He read every word before he made the call. She picked up on the second ring. He introduced himself. He told her everything. Not quickly, not emotionally, just in order. The way he would walk a new subcontractor through a blueprint. The emails, the insurance policy, the loan document, the Scottsdale property. The name, Paul Whitfield. She did not interrupt. When he finished, there was a pause that lasted exactly 3 seconds. "Mr. Washington," she said, "that loan document alone is wire fraud and identity theft, federally chargeable. If they used electronic communication to execute it, and they did, because that's how loan documents move, we have standing with the state AG and potentially with the U.S. Attorney's Office." Another pause. "You said you have photographs of all the documents?" 9 emails, 3 financial documents, all photographed from the original screen before anything was touched. "Good." Her voice was steady and precise. "I'll need everything forwarded to a secure address I'm going to give you in a moment. I want you to understand, this representation is under strict confidentiality. Nothing moves without your sign-off. Nothing. Understood. One more thing. Are you safe where you are?" "Yes." "Then stay there," she said. "Let me work." Reggie was at the table by the time the call ended, already dressed, a mug of coffee in his hand. He had been up long enough to have made the coffee and reviewed his own notes. He set a folded piece of paper on the table in front of Darius without sitting down. Hitman's name is Calvin Merritt. Prior conviction, aggravated assault, 2019. He's local. The email address in the thread traces to a handle he's used before. I had a contact run it against some old case files. Darius looked at the name. He didn't say anything. "I'm passing it to Nair this morning," Reggie said. "Anonymous tip. Contract for hire scheme. Possible murder conspiracy. Framed so she has enough to open a file, but not enough to trace it back to us." He paused. "She's good, Darius. She'll move on it. How long? Long enough to do it right?" Reggie sat down across from him. "You want this to stick? It has to be built clean. Same way you build anything." Darius picked up his coffee. It was cold. He drank it anyway. Kwame called at 11:15. He was using a burner too now, Reggie's idea, and Kwame had adopted it without complaint. His voice was low and controlled. He was at his own house, away from Ariana, speaking from the back room where his kids couldn't hear. "She moved money," Kwame said. Joint savings account. $87,000. I got a flag from Marcus Teal at the bank. He owes me from the Devlin Street project, and he knows something's off. A pause. She moved it in 2 transfers, 11 days after the funeral. Darius wrote the number down on the legal pad. $87,000, 11 days. And Paul? He asked. Daily contact, Kwame said. Phone calls, sometimes twice. He was at the house last Wednesday. Stayed 3 hours. Darius kept writing. There's more, Kwame said. I did some digging on Whitfield. Used a contact in commercial real estate. Woman who knows his brokerage history. He stopped for a second, like he was making sure of something before he said it. Darius. Paul Whitfield found the hitman. He's the one who located Merritt. He structured the Scottsdale deal and ran the paperwork. He coached Ariana on the insurance claim timeline. What to file, when to file it, how to answer the investigators' questions. Darius stopped writing. He didn't just know about the plan, Kwame said. He built it. The line went quiet between them. Ariana is the one who pulled the trigger on it, Kwame said carefully. But Paul Whitfield is the one who handed her the gun. After the call, Darius sat with the legal pad in front of him. He looked at the name he had written at the top of the page the night Reggie first said it. Paul Whitfield. He had circled it twice, without thinking about it. Now he looked at it a long time. He had been thinking of this as one betrayal, one person, one wound. He saw now that it was something different, something larger and more deliberate. A structure 2 people had built together over months, maybe years, with his life as the raw material. There were 2 people who had purchased his death. Both of them would answer for it. The insurance claim landed on the adjuster's desk on a Monday. Ariana had filed it herself, in person, which Petra later noted was a choice that spoke to her confidence. She brought the death certificate, the policy documents, and a grief that looked exactly the way grief is supposed to look. Composed, but fragile. Eyes red at the edges, voice that caught once, in just the right place. The adjuster, a mid-level man named Gerald Foss, had seen 1,000 widows walk through his office door. He handed her a box of tissues and told her the processing period was standard, 60 to 90 days depending on the nature of the claim. What he did not tell her, because he had been instructed not to, was that a woman named Petra Hanks had already called his supervisor's supervisor 3 days earlier. Petra had not accused anyone of anything. She had simply introduced questions. Careful, procedural, well-documented questions, the kind that require additional review, third-party verification, a secondary examination of the coroner's report. All of it standard, all of it slow, none of it traceable back to a dead man who was not dead. Ariana left the insurance office believing the clock had started. The clock had started. She just didn't know who was running it. 22 days after the funeral, Paul Whitfield's car appeared in the driveway of the house on Elmore Street. It stayed there. By the end of the week, Kwame had counted it parked out front on 4 separate mornings. Not visiting, not stopping by. Settled in. Paul had brought 2 suitcases and a garment bag, and a confidence that filled a room the way smoke fills a room. Slow, spreading, and hard to breathe around. Kwame requested a visit. Ariana agreed without hesitation. He was Darius's business partner, still a friendly face, still playing the role of a man working through his own grief while keeping the company running. She offered him water when he came in. She looked well. She was wearing her hair a new way. Paul was in the living room when Kwame walked in. He was sitting in Darius's chair, the wide leather one near the window that Darius had picked out himself, that still had the faint impression of a man who had sat in it thousands of times. Paul had one ankle crossed over his knee and his phone in his hand, and the relaxed posture of someone who believes, completely, that a space belongs to him. He looked up when Kwame entered, gave him a half nod. The kind you give someone you've decided doesn't require your full attention. Kwame, right? Paul said. The business partner. That's right, Kwame said. Paul made a small sound that was almost a laugh. Wild situation, man. Wild. He shook his head like he was thinking about a movie he'd seen, not a man he'd helped put in the ground. You holding up okay? Managing, Kwame said. He retrieved the folder of business documents he had come for. Real documents, legitimately needed. Petra's idea precisely because it needed to be a real errand. He spent 11 minutes in the house. He said what he needed to say, kept his face where it needed to be, and on his way through the living room he paused near the bookshelf beside the couch and adjusted the spine of a book that had been sitting slightly crooked. The audio recorder he left behind was smaller than a matchbook. It had a 48-hour battery and a range of 20 feet. He drove away and did not look in the rearview mirror. The recording ran 19 hours before Kwame retrieved the device 2 days later under the pretense of a forgotten folder. He listened to 3 hours of it himself before he sent anything to Petra. He needed to know what was on it. He needed, in some private part of himself, to hear it directly, because hearing it meant he could report it to Darius with accuracy, and not because he wanted to feel the specific fury of listening to two people laugh inside a dead man's house. He felt it anyway. Paul's voice was clear, relaxed, self-satisfied in a way that had its own particular texture, like a man narrating a game he'd already won. 60 days, give or take. Once the check clears, we move the Scottsdale property into the LLC, and it's clean. Ariana. I just want it done. Paul. It is done, baby. Has been done. Man never saw anything coming. A pause. Then a low laugh. Quiet guy like that. He was never gonna see anything coming. Ariana said something too soft to make out clearly. Paul laughed again. Kwame stopped the recording. He sat in his truck for a while with his hands flat on his thighs and his jaw tight. Then he forwarded the full audio file to Petra's secure server and drove the copy to the address Reggie had given him, a P.O. box registered to nothing, picked up daily. Nair called Reggie the following afternoon. Reggie was in his backyard when the phone rang. He answered on the second ring. Her voice was measured and flat. She did not editorialize. Tell your source, she said. This is bigger than I thought. I need time. But I'm moving. The trap had teeth. The call came on a Thursday. Reggie was at his kitchen table working through a crossword puzzle with a pen. He had never used a pencil for crosswords, said it was the same as admitting you might be wrong. When his phone buzzed, he read the message twice. Then he put down the pen and walked to the back of the house. Darius was in the spare room, laptop open, reviewing a material cost spreadsheet Kwame had sent over. He heard Reggie's footsteps in the hall and knew by the pace of them that something had moved. Reggie sat down in the chair by the window. He folded his hands on his knee. The hitman talked, he said. Darius closed the laptop. Reggie laid it out plain. 3 days after Nair's call, the county's quiet inquiry into the staged accident had reached the hitman through channels he hadn't anticipated. A name surfaced, a detective made contact, and a man with a prior conviction and a working instinct for self-preservation had done the math. He hadn't waited to be found. He had called Nair himself. The voluntary statement ran 4 pages. He had been contracted for the job through an intermediary. He had Venmo transfer records, 2 payments. The first sent 11 weeks before the scheduled hit. The second sent 6 days before it. He had text messages from the intermediary number coordinating the details. The truck, the parking lot, the timeline. The intermediary number traced directly to Paul Whitfield. He'll testify, Reggie said. Nair confirmed it. He wants a deal, and she's in a position to offer one. Darius sat with that for a moment. Outside, a car passed slowly on the street. A dog barked twice and went quiet. So it's murder for hire, Darius said. Federal territory, Reggie said. Conspiracy to commit. Both of them. Ariana for funding it and directing it, Paul for sourcing the man and running the payments. Nair's already been in contact with a federal agent. This isn't a county case anymore. Darius nodded once. That was all. He did not stand up. He did not raise his voice. He did not do the thing that grief and fury together sometimes push a man toward: the overturned chair, the fist through drywall, the noise that doesn't help anything. He had felt that particular pressure before, in the first days at Reggie's house, and he had made a decision then about what kind of man he was going to be through this. He had not changed his mind. "Then the law handles the charges," he said. "That's theirs to run." Reggie watched him carefully. "And the rest? The rest is mine." He said it quietly, the way a man states something that was decided a long time ago. "I'm not going to have someone else in the room when she sees me. That moment belongs to me. I built it. I'm going to be standing in it." Reggie held his gaze for a moment, then he nodded. He understood the distinction completely. There is the consequence a court delivers, and there is the truth a man delivers himself, and only one of those things can look another person in the eye. He met with Petra the following morning on a video call, her face sharp and organized on his laptop screen. She walked him through the case picture with the efficiency of a woman who had been building toward this moment since the day he first called her. The murder-for-hire confirmation changed everything. It federalized the charges. It attached mandatory minimums that no defense attorney could negotiate away, and it made the insurance fraud and wire fraud secondary instruments in a conspiracy rather than standalone offenses. "But I need 3 more weeks, Petra said. "Ariana is still moving. She's made 3 additional transfers out of accounts connected to your name. Each one is another documented act of willful fraud. If we move now," her attorney argues, "she was manipulated, that she didn't understand the full scope of what Paul was doing, that she was a grieving widow in over her head." Petra paused to let that particular absurdity settle. 3 more weeks, and the picture is airtight. She has no cover left. 3 weeks, Darius said. 3 weeks, she confirmed. He closed the laptop and went back to work. Those 3 weeks had a different quality than the ones before them. The waiting was the same, but the weight of it had changed. He was not hiding now. He was finishing something. There is a difference between a man who is running and a man who is building toward a fixed point. And Darius had always been the second kind. He worked the business every morning with Kwame over the phone and video calls. The fraudulent loan was being systematically unwound through Petra's filings. The state AG's office had opened a formal review, and the $340,000 liability that had been hanging over the company's books was already being reversed. The contracts held. The crew held. Kwame was keeping everything standing, which was exactly what Kwame did. In the evenings, Darius wrote. A plain composition notebook, black cover. His handwriting was large and even, the handwriting of a man who made precise marks for a living. He wrote what he knew. He wrote what he had seen. He wrote what it felt like to sit across a dinner table from a woman who had already sold the date of his death. He wrote about the laptop on the counter. He wrote about the video of her face, and the smile, and the single word she breathed at his grave like a prayer she'd been saving. He wrote what he intended to say when the time came, not for her, not to perform anything, because he had always worked better when the plan was written down, when the measurements were recorded, when nothing was left to the unreliability of the moment. On the last night of the 3 weeks, he filled the final page. He closed the journal, set it on the nightstand, and for the first time in weeks, he slept. The video call with Petra lasted 41 minutes. She had her notes in front of her. Darius could see the edge of a yellow legal pad just outside the frame, and she moved through each item the way she moved through everything, without wasted motion, without drama, with the quiet authority of someone who had built too many cases to be impressed by any single piece of one. "Warrants are signed," she said. "Both of them. Ariana and Paul. Nair has them in hand. She's coordinating with the federal agent on timing. The arrests happen simultaneously. She looked directly into the camera. Ariana in the conference room, Paul in the parking lot. Darius was still. The insurance company? Cooperating fully. Their fraud investigator has been briefed. The meeting is framed to Ariana as routine claim verification, standard documentation review before disbursement. She has no reason to suspect anything beyond paperwork. Petra allowed herself the smallest pause. She's been calling their office every 3 days asking about the timeline. He almost smiled at that. Almost. The state AG? Criminal referral on the loan was received and accepted. The formal investigation opened 10 days ago. That's separate from the federal conspiracy charge, which means even if something procedurally complicated the murder-for-hire case, which it won't, she still faces the fraud exposure independently. Petra turned a page on her legal pad. The Scottsdale property has been flagged in a civil asset review. The purchase was partially funded through accounts tied to your identity. The seizure proceedings are already initiated. She will not see a dollar from that property. Darius breathed in slowly through his nose. He thought about the purchase agreement he had seen on that laptop screen. The clean PDF. The 2 names on the deed. The Scottsdale address he had never heard of. He thought about how long it must have taken her to arrange all of it. The patience required. The specific coldness of sitting across a dinner table from a man and smiling at him while a property deed with another man's name on it sits in a folder on your desktop. Everything's in place, Petra said. It was not a question. Everything's in place, he agreed. She looked at him for a moment, not as his attorney, just as a person. Get some sleep tonight. He thanked her and closed the laptop. He called his mother at 8 o'clock. She answered on the second ring, the way she always did, her voice carrying the particular warmth of a woman who picks up fast, because she is always glad it's you. Hey, Mama. She went silent for 1 full second. Just one. And then she screamed. Not a scream of fear. A scream that came from somewhere below language. The sound a person makes when something they have been quietly, privately, desperately praying for has just walked through a door they were afraid to believe would ever open. She screamed, and then she cried, and the crying was the kind that shook her whole body, because he could hear it, could hear her trying to catch her breath between it. He sat on the edge of the bed in Reggie's spare room and let her cry for as long as she needed to. Then she prayed, a short prayer, barely 10 seconds, but she meant every syllable of it, and he sat quietly and let her mean it. When she was done, she went still, and then, in a voice that was soft and clear and carried 30 years of knowing her son, she said, "You finish it, baby. You finish all of it." "Yes, ma'am," he said. "You hear me?" "I hear you." She was quiet again for a moment. He could hear her breathing settle. Then, "Where do I see you?" "Tomorrow," he said. "I'll come to you tomorrow." He said goodnight. He stayed on the line an extra second, just to hear her exhale. The deep, full exhale of a woman setting down a weight she had been carrying alone for 6 weeks. Then he hung up and went outside. Reggie's porch was narrow and faced east. There was a rusted metal chair on the left side that Reggie had owned for at least 20 years and refused to replace. Darius sat in it. The street was quiet. A few houses down, someone's porch light was on, throwing a pale yellow cone across a section of sidewalk. Moths worked their slow circles inside it. He was not anxious. That surprised him. A little. He had expected anxiety, or something close to it. Instead, what he felt was the particular stillness of a man who has checked his measurements for the last time and found them correct. There was nothing left to verify. Every beam was plumb. Every joint was set. The structure would hold. He went over it anyway. Not from doubt. From habit. The same way he walked a job site the morning before an inspection. Not because he expected to find an error, but because the walk itself was part of how he worked. You check, you confirm, then you build. He sat on that porch through the full dark and into the quiet gray hour before dawn, going over everything once more. When the sky began to lighten in the east, he stood up. He went inside. He put on his work boots, lacing them the same way he always did, left then right, double-knotted at the top. He pulled on his canvas jacket. He picked up his keys from the kitchen counter. He drove toward the insurance company's regional office as the sun came up behind him. Ariana Washington arrived 11 minutes early. She wore a black wrap dress, simple and expensive, with small pearl earrings and a thin gold watch. Her hair was pulled back cleanly. She carried a leather folder, the kind that closes with a magnetic snap, and she held it with both hands in front of her like a woman who has prepared for this meeting the way other people prepare for job interviews. She looked like grief. She had practiced looking like grief. The receptionist led her down a short hallway and through a glass door into a conference room. Medium-sized, a long table, 8 chairs, a whiteboard on the far wall with nothing written on it. Her attorney, a man named Caldwell whom Paul had recommended, silver-haired and confident, was already seated on the left side of the table. He stood briefly when she came in, touched her elbow, and they sat together. Ariana set her leather folder on the table and folded her hands on top of it. She was ready. 3 people she did not recognize were already seated on the opposite side of the table. A South Asian woman in a dark blazer, watching her with flat professional eyes. A white man in a government-cut suit, who had the particular stillness of a man who spent his days in courtrooms. And a black woman in her 40s with reading glasses pushed up into her natural hair, a yellow legal pad in front of her, and the kind of quiet around her that made Ariana look twice. She did not know any of their names yet. She would know them soon enough. The insurance company's investigator, a thin man in his 50s named Gerald, who had spoken to her on the phone 3 times, sat at the head of the table. He cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Washington," he said. He opened a folder of his own. "There's an issue with the claim that we need to address before we can proceed." Ariana kept her face soft, concerned, the face of a widow encountering unexpected friction. "Of course," she said. "Whatever you need." Gerald opened his mouth to continue. The conference room door opened. She looked toward it, the way anyone looks at a door that opens, automatically, without thought. And then her brain stopped. Darius walked in. He was wearing his work boots, his canvas jacket, the same jacket he wore to job sites, the one with the small paint mark near the left cuff that he'd never bothered to clean off. He walked to the empty chair directly across from her, pulled it out with one hand, and sat down. He looked exactly the same. He looked exactly the same. Ariana's face went through several things in the space of about 4 seconds. Shock first, pure and total. The kind that doesn't even register as an emotion yet, just a gap where understanding used to be. Then something that looked almost like hope. The wild, involuntary thought that maybe she was wrong about everything. Maybe she had misunderstood. Maybe. Then she looked at the woman with the flat professional eyes, at the man in the government suit, at the black woman with the legal pad. The leather folder sat under her folded hands, the folder that contained her widow's documentation, her death certificate, her proof. The hope curdled. What replaced it was terror. Not the loud, panicked kind, but the very quiet kind that arrives when a person understands, all at once and completely, that there is no door in this room that leads anywhere good, that every move they planned, every document they filed, every conversation they had in a living room they thought was empty has been seen and heard and catalogued by people sitting across this table right now. She did not speak. Neither did anyone else. Darius looked at her. He did not raise his voice. He did not lean forward. He sat the way he always sat, steady, both feet on the floor, the kind of stillness that had nothing to do with passivity. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "I saw you laugh at my grave, Ariana. I needed you to know that I know." 6 weeks of everything was in those 2 sentences. Every dinner she cooked, every hand she touched, every smile she gave him that was a lie dressed as love. He did not say any of that. He didn't need to. The words he chose said all of it. She made no sound. He turned his head and gave a single nod to the black woman with the legal pad. Petra Hanks uncapped her pen. She looked at Detective Nair and spoke in a clear, unhurried voice, walking her through the full charge package. Conspiracy to commit murder for hire, insurance fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, federal charges, mandatory minimum 12 years, with the government pursuing full sentence enhancement given the duration and financial architecture of the conspiracy. Nair stood. So did the federal agent. Caldwell, Ariana's silver-haired attorney, the man Paul recommended, had gone the color of old concrete. He leaned toward Ariana and said something quiet and quick into her ear. Then he gathered his papers, stood, and told the room he was recusing himself immediately. He did not make eye contact with anyone on his way out. The handcuffs were on Ariana's wrists before she found her voice. In the parking lot below, Paul Whitfield was sitting in his car with the seat pushed back and one arm resting on the window frame, watching the building entrance the way a man watches a restaurant door when he's expecting someone to come out with good news. He did not hear them coming. When the officers appeared on both sides of his car at once, he startled so hard he knocked his coffee into his lap. He was still brushing at his pants when the door opened, and the first officer told him to step out of the vehicle. "What?" He looked from one officer to the other. "What is this?" Nobody answered that. They turned him and put his hands behind his back, with the efficiency of people who have done this many times and are not interested in the conversation he wants to have. The federal agent read the charges in a flat, even voice. Conspiracy to commit murder for hire, wire fraud, solicitation. Paul went pale in a way that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. His phone came out of his jacket pocket as part of the search. The federal agent glanced at the screen, then at his partner. He said nothing in the moment, but later, when they cataloged the contents, they would find 214 text messages between Paul and Ariana that nobody on the evidence team yet knew existed. The federal agent, at the station, would call it a gift. Neither Ariana nor Paul made bail. The financial fraud attached to both their names made them flight risks in the eyes of the court. The judge remanded both of them without hesitation. They went into holding with nothing resolved and nothing soft waiting for them. Darius walked out of the building into the afternoon. The sun was lower than he expected. He had lost track of time inside. It hit the side of his face, warm and direct, and he stood on the front steps for a moment and let it. Then he walked to his truck, got in, and drove to his mother's house. The driveway was cracked in the same place it had always been cracked, right at the base where the concrete met the grass. Darius pulled in and sat for a second with the engine running, looking at it. He remembered pouring that driveway. He was 19 years old. He turned off the engine. Through the front window he could see movement, shapes passing back and forth in the warm indoor light, the way people move when there is too much feeling in a room and they need to do something with their hands. His mother, Aunt Gloria, Aunt Bev, Kwame's wide shoulders crossing the window frame and then crossing back. Uncle Reggie standing still in the corner the way Reggie always stood, like a man who had learned long ago that stillness was its own kind of power. Someone had called ahead. He got out of the truck. The smell hit him before he even reached the porch. Collard greens, cornbread, something sweet in the oven. His mother fed people the way other people prayed, consistently, without being asked, because she understood that the body needed tending even when the soul was the thing that was broken. He pushed the door open. The room went quiet for exactly 1 second. Then his mother crossed it in 4 steps and grabbed him. She was small. She had always been small. But she held him with her whole body, both arms locked around his middle, her face pressed against his chest, and she didn't say anything for a long moment. He held her back. "I'm here," he said. "I'm all right." She pulled back and looked at his face. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. She was looking at him the way a person looks at something they thought they'd lost, checking, cataloging, making sure it's real. "Sit down," she said. "You're going to eat, and then you're going to tell me everything." He told them everything. It took almost an hour. He sat on the couch with a plate of food going cold on the coffee table in front of him, and he talked, and the room listened. He told them about the laptop, about the 9 emails and the email he photographed without touching the mouse, about driving back to the job site and sitting in his truck for 45 minutes because he didn't trust himself to move until he knew what he was going to do. He told them about the folder labeled Finances, about the loan in his name he never signed, about the Scottsdale property, and the name on the deed he had never heard before. He told them about watching Ariana cook his favorite dinner the night before the staged accident, and how she touched his hand at the table, and how he sat there and let her without flinching once. He told them about the smile, the window, and the smile she thought no one could see. He told them about the grave marker, about the black dress and the veil, and Kwame standing there in the cold playing his part so perfectly that Darius, listening through the recorder, had almost felt sorry for the man having to hold all that. He told them what she whispered. "Finally." Aunt Gloria made a sharp sound and pressed her hand over her mouth. Aunt Bev looked at the floor. Kwame, seated in the armchair by the window with his forearms on his knees, stared at a fixed point somewhere between the floor and the wall, and said nothing. His jaw was tight. Reggie already knew all of it. He sat in his corner with his arms crossed and his face unreadable, the way he had always looked when he was letting someone else have the floor. Darius told them about the Hitman statement, about the Venmo records and the intermediary number that traced straight to Paul Whitfield, about what it meant when the charge shifted from fraud into murder for hire, about how he had sat at Reggie's kitchen table and absorbed that information without raising his voice, because raising his voice would not have helped anything. He told them about writing in the journal, about sleeping soundly. When he finished, the room was quiet. His mother had not spoken once during the whole hour. She sat in her chair with her hands folded in her lap, looking at him. She waited until she was sure he was done. Then she said, "And what are you going to do now?" Darius looked at her. He almost smiled. "I'm already doing it," he said. "Divorce is filed. Kwame holds primary stake in the business now. Books are clean. Restructuring's done. Petra reversed the fraudulent loan. The house is listed. Every account Ariana touched is flagged in the civil forfeiture." He paused. "She's going to come out of this with nothing that was ever mine." His mother nodded once, slow and final, the way she nodded when something had been decided and there was nothing left to argue about. Kwame exhaled through his nose. Reggie uncrossed his arms. "Eat your food," his mother said. "It's cold." He drove to the county jail the next morning. The visiting process was formal and brief. A glass partition, a phone receiver on each side, a corrections officer standing at a distance. He had requested the visitation through the proper channels. It was granted as a legal right. Ariana was brought in wearing a holding uniform, gray, shapeless. She sat down across the partition and picked up the receiver and looked at him. She did not speak first. He had known she wouldn't. He spoke for 90 seconds. He had the words already, not memorized from the journal, but settled in him the way anything settles after you've held it long enough. He told her he was not angry. He told her he was not broken. He told her that anger was what she had wanted from him, that it had probably always been what she wanted, proof that he was the lesser man she had decided he was, and that he had refused to give it to her, and he was refusing now. He told her he was going to be fine. He told her that she was not. Then he stood, set the receiver down, and walked out. He did not look back through the glass. He did not think about her face. He merged onto the highway 20 minutes later and kept going. Not toward Reggie's house, not toward the street where the old house was already listed with a sign out front. Toward the new city he had already chosen. 22 months later, the ground was soft from 2 days of rain. Darius stood at the edge of the site in his boots and canvas jacket, coffee in one hand, watching his crew move. 43 people. Trucks backed into position. A crane assembling itself on the far end of the lot, like something waking up. The morning air smelled like wet earth and diesel, and the particular kind of possibility that only exists at the very beginning of something. The sign was already up. Washington Asante Construction Group. Municipal Housing Authority Project, Phase 1. His name, first on the sign. He had not asked for that. Kwame had arranged it and told him after the fact, and when Darius tried to say something about it, Kwame held up one hand and walked away. That was 3 weeks ago. Darius still thought about it sometimes. Kwame was moving across the site now. Hard hat on, clipboard in hand, stopping to crouch beside a survey stake and check it against the plans rolled under his arm. He moved the way he always moved on a job, like a man who understood that the things you build on top of the ground are only as solid as what you've confirmed below it. 12 of the new hires were somewhere in the cluster of orange vests behind him, taking direction from the crew leads. Good workers. Showed up early, asked the right questions, didn't cut corners. Darius had watched them for 2 weeks before this morning, and he'd seen what he needed to see. He had funded the apprenticeship program quietly. No press, no announcement, just a conversation with the program director and a wire transfer and a standing agreement that whenever graduates finished their first year, Washington Asante would give them a real look. Not charity, not a gesture. A transaction he believed in. You put capable people in front of opportunity, and then you get out of the way and see what they build. 6 of the 12 had come through that pipeline. He watched one of them, a young woman named Terry, talking through a framing question with a crew lead twice her age. The crew lead was nodding. That was not nothing. He had crew leads who did not nod for anyone. Darius drank his coffee. Ariana had been convicted on all counts. He had not attended the trial. Petra kept him informed by phone, delivering updates in the clean, organized way she delivered everything. Facts first, then context. No editorializing. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. The verdict came back unanimous. The judge had said things at sentencing that Petra relayed to him word for word. Deliberate, prolonged, calculated. The judge had referenced the graveside recording specifically, described it as evidence of a person who felt no ambiguity about what she had done and no grief about who she had done it to. The sentence was 19 years in a federal correctional facility. Earliest possible release date, contingent on good behavior, fell in the year Ariana would turn 60. The Scottsdale property was seized in full as part of the civil forfeiture. Every dollar she had moved out of the joint accounts, the $87,000 liquidated 2 weeks after the staged funeral, another $23,000 transferred in the weeks that followed, was recovered through Petra's civil suit. She left the courtroom with nothing that had ever been his. He had made sure of that. Not out of cruelty, out of the same principle he applied to every structure he'd ever built. You do not leave load-bearing material in the hands of someone who will use it to collapse something on top of you. Paul Whitfield received 16 years. His brokerage license was permanently revoked the week the guilty verdict came in. The 214 text messages recovered from his phone at the parking lot arrest were entered into evidence and read aloud in open court. Petra told Darius that Paul's attorney had tried 3 different defense angles and that each one had been dismantled by Paul's own words. By the end, the attorney had stopped trying. There was nothing left to work with. The hitman received 7 years in exchange for his full cooperation and testimony. Darius had not loved that. He'd sat with it for a day before he accepted it. Without the testimony, the murder-for-hire charge might not have held on both of them, might have collapsed into something lesser, something that could be plea-bargained into a few years and quiet supervision. He was a practical man. 7 years was the cost of 19, and he understood arithmetic. He lived in a small house now. Different city, different street. A porch wide enough that he'd put 2 chairs out there and a small table between them. And on the evenings when the weather was right, he sat outside and listened to the neighborhood settle into the dark. He had planted a garden in the side yard in the spring. Tomatoes, mostly. Some peppers. He watered it every morning before work, and it had become the thing he did not know he needed, something alive and small that required his attention and gave back in proportion to what he put in. He was not in a new relationship. People asked sometimes. His aunts mostly. He did not have a complicated answer. He was fine. He was more than fine. He had learned, in the months since the highway, that the wholeness he had spent years looking for inside his marriage had been his the entire time. He had just never thought to check. Ariana had convinced him, slowly and without him noticing, that he was only complete in the context of her. That was the quietest part of the betrayal, the part that had taken the longest to undo. He was still undoing it. That was fine, too. He was patient. Uncle Reggie visited every few months. They watched football and argued about the Bears the same way they had argued about the Bears for 30 years, with full conviction and no resolution. It was the best thing in Darius's week. The journal from the 6 weeks at Reggie's house was on his nightstand. He had not thrown it away. He had not read it either. It sat there in the quiet, the way certain things sit. Not forgotten, not urgent, just present until the right moment arrived to know what to do with it. On a Thursday evening, chosen deliberately because Darius did not do things accidentally, he drove to the cemetery on the east edge of the county. He parked and walked to the plot. The marker was gone, had been gone for over a year. The county filing had been unraveled, the placeholder removed, the ground cleared and leveled. There was nothing there now but a square of grass, a little greener than the patches around it, from where the soil had been turned over. He stood there in the quiet. The evening was cool. The light was going golden through the trees at the far end of the cemetery, long and low and soft. Somewhere across the grounds, a groundskeeper was running a mower. The sound was distant, peaceful almost. He looked at the empty plot for a while. Then he got back in his truck. He drove east, toward the lights coming on across the city as the sun went down, toward the east side block where a building was going up, and the sign out front had his name on it. He had things to build. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.